Friends, have you ever wondered what keeps us alive when all hopes in life are gone? When death surrounds us from every direction, what is that power within us that keeps us breathing? Today I am going to tell you such a story. This is not the story of a movie, but a reality. This is the story of Ayesha, a girl who set out to fulfill her dreams. But nature had prepared a test for her that she could never have imagined. This is the story of a struggle on the burning sands of the Thar desert for 91 days. A story of pain, courage, and eventually victory, so fasten your seatbelt. Because after hearing this story, you will be forced to see life from a whole new perspective. The date was the 15th of May 2018. 28-year-old Ayesha, a renowned travel blogger and photographer from Delhi, set out in her Jeep for Rajasthan's Thar desert. Her dream was to capture pictures of untouched parts of the desert that the world had never seen before. She was very happy. Her eyes were full of dreams and her heart was filled with passion. About 150 kilometers away from Jaisalmer, on a lonely road, suddenly her Jeep came to a halt with a jerk. She tried multiple times, but the vehicle wouldn't start. All around were only sand dunes for miles. There was no mobile network. At first, Ayesha thought that maybe some vehicle would pass by. But hours passed, and there was no sign of a human being anywhere. The sun began to burn like fire in the sky. She had only the bottles of water left. She decided that instead of waiting in the Jeep, she would walk to find help. This was her first and biggest mistake. She had no idea she was venturing deep into the heart of the desert, from where returning was almost impossible. The very first day of walking left her exhausted. The heat in the desert is nothing like what we feel in cities. It feels as if fire is raining down from the sky and earth is like a burning frying pan. Her throat was parched dry. One water bottle was already finished and the second was half empty. As night fell, the cold made her shiver. In the desert, it is fire during the day and ice at night. This is the truth of the desert. By the next morning, her lips were cracked. Darkness began to cloud her vision. For the first time, she realized how deep the trouble was. The fear of death crept into her heart. She collapsed on the sand. She felt as if everything was over. Her mind flashed with the faces of her family. She wanted to cry, but her body didn't have enough water left to produce tears. This was her first meeting with death, which stared at her relentlessly. When a person thinks everything is over, nature often gives a tiny signal. Ayesha was almost unconscious. When she saw some rocks in the distance, she gathered her remaining strength and crawled to the shade of those rocks. That shade felt like heaven to her at that moment. The next morning, when she opened her eyes, she saw dewdrops collected on the leaves of some wild bushes because of the night's moisture. She rubbed her scarf on the leaves and squeezed out a few drops on her dry lips. Those weren't just drops of water, they were drops of life. In that moment, Ayesha realized crying wouldn't help her survive. She had to fight. She had to learn the rules of the desert. She took out a small diary from her bag and wrote, "Day 3, I am still alive." It was not just a sentence, it was a promise she made to herself. Now Ayesha was no longer a tourist. She had become a survivor. She tried to recall lessons from school and survival videos she had watched online. She remembered how sunlight can be focused through a camera lens to start a fire. After hours of effort, a thin wisp of smoke rose from dry grass, and then a tiny fire lit up. That fire gave her not just warmth, but also hope. She learned that one should walk only during mornings and evenings and stay in shade during the scorching afternoon. There was no food, so she did something unimaginable. She began roasting and eating insects, grasshoppers, and whatever else seemed edible. Each bite felt like poison, but to quell the fire in her stomach, it was necessary. Her beautiful face had burned in the sun. Her body had sores all over. She was losing weight rapidly. She was no longer the same Ayesha who had come from Delhi. In the desert, there is an enemy bigger than hunger and thirst: loneliness. Days passed. Weeks passed. Ayesha hadn't heard a human voice. All around was a terrifying silence that screamed in her ears. She often started talking to herself, sometimes to her mother, sometimes to her father. She argued with them in the air, complained, and then cried. Many times she hallucinated that someone was calling her, but there was no one there. This loneliness eats a person from the inside. One day she wrote in her diary, "Day 30, I don't know if I'm going mad or just trying to stay alive. This silence sometimes feels louder than bullets." She kept wondering, is anyone even looking for me? Or has everyone assumed I'm dead? This question consumed her every moment. Her body was still fighting, but her mind was starting to give up. Around the 45th day, when Ayesha, with her last ounce of strength, climbed a sand dune, she saw something shiny in the distance. She thought it was a car's windshield or a village roof. A new hope surged through her. She ran like a madwoman in that direction. She fell, got up, and ran again. Hours later, when she reached the spot, her heart shattered into pieces. It wasn't a car or a village. It was a mirage, an illusion of water in the desert. That moment completely broke her. All her courage evaporated. She fell onto the sand and wept bitterly. For the first time, she prayed to God, "Enough, please take me. I am tired." That day was the worst of her 91-day struggle. The breaking of hope is more painful than death itself. In that broken state, Ayesha lay unconscious for hours. In her faintness, she saw her mother's face. She remembered something her mother once told her: "You lose only when you stop trying." That voice echoed in her ears. When she opened her eyes, the sun was setting. A voice inside her said, "I cannot die. I cannot lose. I promised my mother I would do something big one day. I cannot die in anonymity." That single moment changed everything. The broken girl within her had died, and a warrior was born. She decided she would no longer wait for help. She would help herself. She would keep walking in one direction until she either found life or death. She wrote in her diary, Day 50, "Today I was reborn." This is no longer just about survival. This is about victory. Around the 70th day, the weather turned monstrous. A terrible sandstorm hit. The sky turned yellow. The wind was so fierce that Ayesha had to cling to a rock to avoid being blown away. The storm raged for hours. She thought it was her last day. Sand filled her mouth, nose, ears, everywhere. But when the storm calmed down, a miracle happened. The storm had blown away the upper layer of sand. Between two rocks, a small depression was revealed, where a little water had collected. The water was dirty, but for Ayesha, it was nectar. She drank as much as she could. This was nature's strange play. The same desert that had pushed her into the jaws of death gave her another chance to live. That water kept her alive for the next few weeks. She now understood that nature could be both cruel and merciful. 90 days had passed. Ayesha had become a walking skeleton. Her clothes were in tatters. Her flesh was almost gone. She was alive only because of her sheer willpower. One morning, as she walked ahead, her eyes fell on the ground. She couldn't believe what she saw. Fresh camel footprints in the sand. It wasn't a hallucination. It was real. It meant that some human had recently passed by. For the first time in 90 days, she saw a sign of civilization. Tears streamed from her eyes, but these weren't tears of pain or sadness. They were tears of joy and hope. She put all her remaining energy into following those footprints. She didn't know where the path would lead, but it was her last hope. She kept walking and walking until she collapsed unconscious. On the 91st morning, some nomads traveling with a caravan of camels spotted something strange in the sand. When they came closer, their eyes widened. It was the body of a woman, still breathing faintly. They quickly picked her up, gave her water, and took her to a nearby village hospital. When Ayesha opened her eyes, she found herself on a bed. There were white walls around her and a fan spinning overhead. She couldn't believe it. She asked the nurse, "What's the date today?" The nurse replied, "The 14th of August 2018. Hearing this, she broke down crying. 91 days. 91 days she had fought death, and today she had won. When she finally recovered and returned home, she was a completely different person. In an interview, she said, "Those 91 days taught me the real value of the things we waste every day. A glass of clean water, a piece of bread, the voice of your family. These are the most precious things in the world." I went into the desert to capture a few photographs, but the desert showed me the biggest picture of life.